This program is about unsolved mysteries. Whenever possible, the actual family members and police officials have participated in recreating the events. What you are about to see is not a news broadcast.
In San Francisco, the murder of a wealthy businessman has baffled police for over a year. With the investigation stalled, the lead detective tried a novel approach. He opened his case files to a handful of volunteer sleuths enrolled in a course called Murder 101. Tonight you'll see whether the students came up with new clues that might actually help solve the case. In Rhode Island, a fiery car crash leaves a young mother paralyzed and unconscious. Now she needs your help to find the two anonymous heroes who saved her life. In 1984, 7-year-old Gary Grant Jr., the son of a police officer, was found murdered in Atlantic City, New Jersey. Incredibly, the prime suspect was just a boy himself who confessed to the crime and then recanted. Join me tonight. You may be able to help solve a mystery. San Francisco, California, December 1993. A prosperous businessman who supplied noodles to dozens of Chinatown restaurants is stabbed to death. Case file number 931-86131. Current status, unsolved. The Chinatown case is just one of thousands of unsolved murders that plague police departments across the country. With no immediate solution in sight, the detective in charge tried an unconventional approach. He opened his case files to a college class called Murder We Solve, created by a woman named Brooke Stewart. The class had already helped close one case, the slaying of a taxi driver in 1992. Tonight, we invite you to join another group of students as they try to unravel the peculiar case of the murdered Chinatown businessman.
How many of you ever thought that you would be sitting here today solving an actual murder?
When Brooke Stewart's class met in December of 1994, the would-be detectives included a ballet teacher, a housewife, and several writers. San Francisco Police Inspector Prentice Sanders briefed the students on the case.
Good morning. So you want to be homicide detectives, huh? Well, first you've got to buy yourself a hat like this.
I've been working on this case now almost a year. And certainly I have believed that once you become stymied, you to take the case and look at it from an entirely different angle. Open it up and start all over again. And the class gave me an opportunity to do that.
Let me introduce you to your victim.
Jin Fang was a 42-year-old businessman, owner of 2 noodle factories. On December 18, 1993, he and an employee were attacked by a pair of assailants. Jin Fang was stabbed to death. Inspector Sanders was called to the scene around 1:30 a.m.
What do you have
here? We're trying to get some fingerprints on the...
The rear window of Mr. Fang's van was broken. The van's interior ransacked. No fingerprints were found, but the murder weapon had been left behind.
In the van, we found the knife. The knife turned out to be a regular, cheap kitchen steak knife. One that you would pay 99 cents for at the 99-cent store. And it was very worn, as if it had been washed 100 times or more.
Authorities also recovered this BB gun. However, they weren't certain it had been used in the assault until they interviewed the only witness to the crime. The evening of the murder, Jin Fang had offered a ride home to one of his supervisors, Mrs. Yi Sung.
Shortly after midnight, they exited the building, left and went outside, just outside, and got into Mr. Fang's van. The window was broken out, and Mr. Fang did not notice that his window was broken. He and his passenger entered the van, and he drove about 100 feet. According to Mrs. Yi, the two young men spoke in fluent Cantonese. They demanded the money. Where is the money? The man with the gun struck Mrs. Yi along the side of the head with the gun, demanding that she not turn around nor look.
喂，啲錢喺邊度啊？冇錢啊！你冇錢，你冇玩我冇錢啊！你快啲拎出嚟，我即刻吉你啊！快啲啦！
Mrs. Yi said the terrifying episode lasted more than half an hour, far longer than most robberies. During that time, the two men ripped apart the van's interior, repeating over and over their demand for the money. The money. The killer struck with brutal accuracy. A single plunge of the knife sliced directly into Mr. Fang's heart.
Either this stabber is very lucky to hit such a vital spot, or he is very experienced in knowing where the vital spot is.
Before fleeing, the assailants threatened to kill Mrs. Yi if she called for help.
She stayed there about 2 hours, afraid to move because of the threat. She didn't hear a car leave, and she didn't hear anyone running. We're now open for questions. Just before I go into
the case review provoked a number of insightful questions.
One of the things that keeps bothering me is the murder weapon. It's a cheesy little kitchen knife, looks all worn out. And if I was going to go get serious with somebody, I wouldn't take a beat-up old kitchen knife.
Have you checked to see if that kind of cheap knife that was used is used at any of the restaurants where he has clients?
Mrs. Yi kept saying, they kept asking where the money is.
Right.
They were looking for a large quantity of money. They thought he had a large amount of money.
What do his personal and business bank records show? Any recent large money that went in and out that might be what the question, where is the money, referred to?
That's an excellent question, and I tell you why. Remember I told
Inspector
you that
Sanders
knife
told the
had been
class what he knew about Mr. Fang's daily activities.
was becoming.
Hello, Chen Tai.
Hello, how are you?
At times accompanied by his wife, Fang had personally collected money from his customers. A typical day would net up to $1,000 in cash.
$300?
Good price. Best price in the city.
Every time you come in, your price goes up. Here's your $300.
I have a hard time with the thought that Mr. Fang made the routes himself, collecting the receipts and collecting the money. If there wasn't something else involved for him doing this as a successful businessman, why wouldn't he have somebody else do it?
Well, that's a good question. But he routinely did it himself. Now, that thought has crossed my mind. Maybe he's frugal. Is it that he is frugal? Or is it that there is something else going on? That's what we
In fact, there was evidence that the case had another dimension. 3 weeks after the slaying, Sanders received a call from a mysterious tipster.
Who's this? Oh, okay. No, I don't care who you are. Okay. Informant advised that I should look into the gambling angle with Mr. Fang, that Mr. Fang was, in fact, an avid gambler and had connections in the Chinese community for gambling, and that was likely the motive for his murder rather than petty robbery.
If the caller was to be believed, Jin Fang had been a key figure in the shadowy world of illegal gambling, both as a bettor and as a bookmaker.
This week should be even better. I want to put 20,000 on the Dallas game.
That's 4 times what you did last week.
I know that, but I'm good for it, you know.
The informant claimed that on the day of his death, Mr. Fang had collected an eye-opening $25,000 in cash.
That $25,000? How do you know that?
It was an extremely promising lead. However, none of the information could be corroborated, and Sanders found himself back at square one. By the end of the class, each student had heard the baffling mix of evidence, leads, and rumors in the case of Jin Fang, and each student came back with a theory.
We do have some evidence that that's...
My scenario of the thing was that somebody that on his route he had a bet with, he won the money from the person on the route. The person on the route was very ticked off that he lost the money, sent somebody out there to get the money back, and in the process killed him.
I think maybe somebody overheard something. It seems like maybe a crime of opportunity, or possibly it could have been planned and made to look like a robbery.
I think there may be a link with Mrs. Yi because we don't have as much information from her. So it looks to me like with them moving their arms and things around to kill him in the front, that she would have been able to identify something more about them.
I think what's real exciting for me with this class is it was a completely unique idea. It's never been tried anywhere to my knowledge, and it's actually become successful. We're finding that this class is actually coming up with ideas, with leads that are helping to facilitate the investigation.
The students were given a week to submit a written analysis. Some, like Nick Dalby, took their investigation to the streets.
But what about the gun that they
Another student, Kara Llewellyn, questioned a friend of hers who had lived in Chinatown for many years. Kara and Nick later went to police headquarters to try out their theories on Inspector Sanders.
I was thinking that this was more of an amateurish job. I sort of think it's some gang wannabes from new immigrants to the country. Doesn't seem to fit, to me, the traditional sort of signature, if you will, of the Chinese gangs in Chinatown. Well, what about your dad? I know
Kara's friend had told her about a different network of gangs that operated within the Chinese community.
I think the Vietnamese gangs are very different.
They're different?
Ethnic, yeah, they're ethnic Chinese, but they're more ruthless.
Kara learned that many Vietnamese immigrants are well-versed in Cantonese, and some of the newcomers might be eager to prove themselves to longtime gang members.
Hello, Chen Tai.
Hello, how are you?
We're okay.
Maybe some young wannabes thought this guy has money. They noticed that he has jewelry. He's kind of a high roller by the clothes that he wears, and that they thought he would be a good mark.
Give me 100 pounds.
100 pounds?
Yeah.
Nick, why don't you jump in?
Nick Dalby proposed a scenario that was totally at odds with Kara's.
I think Mr. Fang's assailants knew Mr. Fang, knew his routine.
But this week should be even better.
I think Mr. Fang was into gambling in a very high level. I think it was one of the fun things he liked to do. They overheard Mr. Fang either taking or making a large bet. They knew that he was going to collect a large sum of money. They expected that he had that money that day. And they were disappointed and surprised when they found out that there was nothing in the van. He didn't have it on him. And I don't think they killed Mr. Fang deliberately. When he started struggling, that's when they killed him.
So, Nick, you feel that the robbers expected to find more money than they actually found on Mr. Fang's person. Talking to Kara and Nick, and the other students too, is very stimulating. It caused me to think and rethink some ideas that I had entertained during the course of the last year that I've been working on this case.
So which scenario lies at the heart of Jin Fang's murder? Soon after briefing the students, Inspector Sanders was contacted by a second anonymous informant who argued that the murder was tied to illicit betting. Inspector Sanders believes the tip to be credible, but only time and further investigation will enable the police to close in on the elusive killers of Jin Fang. Next, An accident victim is searching for the two men who saved her life.
Hi, Colleen. Welcome to our class.
This is Colleen Frangioni. She is 41 years old, the mother of two grown sons. She has been paralyzed since 1978. Colleen is a very special woman with a very simple message.
Very simple. Buckle up. I didn't. It's my slogan, my motto.
Over the last 15 years, Colleen has spoken to more than 10,000 high school and junior high school students. Working in both Rhode Island and Florida, she has erected billboards and distributed pamphlets in a tireless one-woman crusade. Colleen Frangioni has earned high praise for her efforts from several citizens groups. But seatbelt safety is not her only mission. Colleen is also searching for two heroes, the men who saved her life. On the night she was paralyzed, they snatched her from a burning car and from certain death. Colleen herself remembers nothing. In 1978, Colleen was 26 years old, recently divorced, and struggling to support two young sons. On September 23rd of that year, Colleen drove home from a rare night out, dancing at the Naval Officers Club in Newport, Rhode Island. Just before 1 a.m., Colleen was turning onto Rogers Road. She came to a full stop, but tragically, a carload of teenagers behind her did not.
The hit of that second car just twisted me beyond the normal range. And that twist was so forceful that it broke two lower vertebrae and severed my spinal cord. And I'm glad I don't remember it.
Colleen lay unconscious as flames engulfed her car. Patty and Joe Trifero, who lived across the street, rushed to help.
No, the door's locked. The door's jammed, Joe. It won't open. Joe, it's stuck. I am. It's stuck.
I can't get this.
We gotta get her out.
The fire was spreading really fast. The whole back of the car was on fire. The back seat was on fire. And as we were trying to pull open the doors, they wouldn't open because of the crash. They were jammed. And I heard in the background, get a crowbar.
I glanced over to my right, and there were two men standing there. My wife and I ran to our garage to get a crowbar. The time while we were gone, I believe either one or both of those gentlemen pulled Colleen from the car and brought her up onto the sidewalk. They were the only two I felt that were physically able to have gotten her out of the car at that point.
By now, a third rescuer had appeared. She apparently took charge of the situation.
She's in shock. Guys, call 911 and get a blanket. Hurry. Okay.
When we returned, there was a woman there, must have had some type of nursing background, that said that she was in shock to get her feet up. And shortly after that, the entire car was in flames.
Amazingly, no one else was seriously injured. But during the intense effort to put out the fire, both of the men who had pulled Colleen to safety vanished. For 10 days, Colleen hovered between life and death. She awoke to the terrifying reality that she was paralyzed from the waist down.
Once I had to deal with not being able to walk, I was hurt. It was like I was heartbroken. That was my first feeling inside, you know. And then it went from that to how am I going to do everything that I never even thought about. Sitting up, putting a shoe on, getting dressed.
But Colleen's spirit was indomitable. She was discharged from the hospital after 4 months. Colleen went on to raise her two sons as a single parent, and in 1985 she married again. Yet not a day goes by that Colleen doesn't think about the accident and the two men who saved her life.
How lucky only to be paralyzed. And now I'm saving lives because they pulled me from the car. I just believe we're all meant to meet. I would have been killed if it wasn't for you guys. And I want to thank you both, or just one of you, whichever one. So, and even if you can just give me a call, I would really appreciate it.
When Colleen's appeal aired, luck was with her. Both men called our phone center. Their names are Ray Myers and Mike Kane. Though they both live in the Providence, Rhode Island area, they had seen each other only once in the aftermath of Colleen's accident. Colleen was thrilled to learn that her rescuers had been found after more than 15 years.
What Unsolved Mysteries did was the tip lady called me, told me, you know, that she had heard from one of them and gave me his number because, of course, they didn't want to give out my number. So I called him, I said who I was, and it was just so nice. In fact, we talked so long that night, my husband fell asleep. We were in bed, and my husband fell sound asleep while him and I were just talking about, you know, he was telling me things that I had no idea.
On December 27th, 1993, Colleen finally was able to meet her heroes in person. Ray Myers was the first to arrive.
Oh, God, I can't believe I could really touch you. I really didn't think that you existed. Thank you. Oh,
I was in shock. Couldn't believe it was me, you know. I mean, I knew it was me, but it's like, it's incredible. That's how I feel about this whole thing. I think it's incredible.
Half an hour later, it was Mike Kane's turn.
Hi. Mike? Oh, gosh, how nice to meet you. Thank you so much. Oh, gosh. You know, I tried to imagine what you looked like, and I can't do that when I don't know the person.
I was surprised, you know, why 15 years later?
Oh, I just can't tell you how much I appreciate it.
Why, you know, why?
It's so important.
But when she said she wanted to thank the people, and after I spoke to her on the phone, it was like, this lady is really sincere, you know. And that's what she wanted. She wanted to thank us.
I feel the whole circle, it's all completed. All the pieces of the puzzle
How did I get your number?
are all put together now. And it's a real peaceful feeling inside. That's, to me, and in fact, how many times have I said in the last 3 weeks, how many people get to meet their guardian angels? And this is how I feel.
When we return, a police officer's painful search for answers in the murder of his own 7-year-old son. Thursday, January 12th, 1984, Atlantic City, New Jersey.
Morning, Gare. You must have been really tired last night. You slept.
It was a rare midweek holiday for 7-year-old Gary Grant Jr. There was no school because of a teachers' conference. Gary lived with his mother, May. She and Gary's father, an Atlantic City police detective, had been separated for nearly a year.
And after breakfast, are you going to go out and play with your friends?
No, Mom, not today.
Why not?
I have an appointment this afternoon at 2:30.
Wow, sounds important. What kind of appointment is it?
Nothing, just an appointment.
Who's this appointment with?
I was asking him with who, and he said it was a secret. So I thought, you know, it's silly. You know, he's a little boy. Something to do maybe with his little girlfriend around the corner or something. So I kind of left it at that. And he wanted to go out and play, so he got dressed and he went out to play.
Around noon, Gary left home. He said he would be back by 4 p.m., before it got dark.
It got to be like 4:30, and he still hadn't showed up for dinner, and he liked his dinner. He never missed. And he still hadn't showed up, so I started getting worried. And I went down to where 2 girls that Gary played with, that were friends of his, and asked them if they had seen Gary.
Do you want to come in?
No, I'm just looking for Gary.
Well, he was here in the afternoon, but he left around 4:30 to go home.
Oh, okay, well, if you see him, will you please tell Gary to come home?
Okay, Mrs. Grant, I'll tell him.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
When another 2 hours passed with no sign of Gary, May telephoned her husband.
I searched until well after midnight, probably around 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. I walked around. As a matter of fact, I called out from work that night. I was due to go into work at midnight, and I had called my sergeant and advised him that I wouldn't be coming in.
By the next morning, Friday, the Atlantic City Police Department was engaged in an all-out search. Regulations prevented Detective Grant from taking part in the official investigation, but as a father, he was unwilling to stand by and do nothing.
I started searching every possible place I could think of. I started searching abandoned houses. I started searching underneath the boardwalk. I started searching arcades and questioning people who were working in the arcades.
Officer Gary Grant, have you seen this boy? He's been missing. Take a good look, please.
There was a couple people that worked in one of the arcades who had said that they had seen him on Friday, early on Friday. So I'm thinking, well, that he's still somewhere around on the streets. By Friday night, it started getting dark again, and still no signs or no word of Gary. I started then looking in alleyways and trash cans and dumpsters. The streets can be pretty mean now, you know, for an adult, let alone for a 7-year-old child. And by that time, I was fearing the worst.
At 3:30 the next afternoon, the body of Gary Grant Jr. was found in a vacant, weed-infested lot, less than 2 blocks from his home. He had been bludgeoned to death. Nearby lay a short length of heavy pipe, probably the murder weapon. The police immediately imposed a radio silence until the boy's family could be notified. At virtually that same moment, Detective Grant, exhausted and on the verge of collapse, happened upon the scene.
So I really didn't know what was going on, but I got a knot in my stomach, and then something just told me that there's a very good possibility that they found Gary.
Hey, Sarge, what's happening? Hey, Gary, did you get a radio call? No, I saw the patrol cars, wanted to see what's happening. What'd you find out? Gary, you don't want to know. I'm driving around for 3 days. No sleep, looking for my son. I want to know something. Gary, we found your son. He's dead. I want to see my son right
I didn't want to believe that it was him. In my mind, I knew that they, I mean, why would they lie to me about something like that? But at the same time, being a father, you don't want to believe it. You don't want to believe that your kid is lying back there somewhere, you know, and he's never going to get up again.
When they told me that Gary was dead, I just went totally numb, my whole body. I didn't want to believe it. I just can't imagine why someone would do that to a 7-year-old boy. Any 7-year-old boy.
Hey, kid.
The investigation began like all others, with detectives tracing the victim's final hours and talking to those who knew him best.
Do you know Gary Grant?
Sure, he lived around here, over in Arctic.
When was the last time you saw him?
A couple days ago.
That would be Thursday. Where was that?
He was down by the junior high.
Who was he with?
He was with Boo.
Would that be Boo Mason?
Carl Mason, nicknamed Boo, was a mildly retarded 12-year-old with an IQ of 65. Though Boo was 5 years older than Gary, he was smaller in height and weight. The two boys were good friends and often played together.
Hello, young man. We're with the Atlantic City Police Department. We need to ask you a few questions. Did you know this Gary Grant kid?
Sure, I knew Gary.
When did you last see him?
Wednesday, after school.
What did you two do?
We were at the park, over on Texas.
You sure you didn't see him on Thursday?
Nope.
You're sure it was Wednesday?
Yeah, we were supposed to meet on Thursday, but Gary never showed up.
Okay, kid, thanks.
Boo said he hadn't been with Gary. But detectives canvassing the neighborhood kept coming back with stories that he had, in fact, been with Gary. So They didn't know what to do. There was this conflict. Boo seemed like such a harmless character. He was educably retarded. He was known as a scaredy cat in the neighborhood, but they just couldn't reconcile the conflict.
They're like, we like to ask you some questions, and I came outside.
Carl Mason is now 21 years old.
Some questions like, have I seen Gary at all today? I said, no, I seen him the day before, and that was it. And then they just said, okay, and they were asking me some other questions, but I don't remember. Then later on that night, they came back and they took me.
At midnight on Saturday, Boo, accompanied by his grandmother, was driven to police headquarters. Once there, Boo was separated from his grandmother and led into a small room.
Look, just tell us the truth and we can all go home.
What happened when you and Gary left the school gym?
We went to the park over on Texas, but that was on Wednesday.
What did you do at the park?
We played on the swings.
Wait, those swings were taken down for cleaning last week.
I didn't see Gary on Thursday. He didn't show up.
In questioning Boo, his stories were inconsistent, and the detectives wrestled around with it until finally, around 3 o'clock, one version of the story, he acknowledged being with the victim at the crime scene, and that he, in fact, hit him with the pipe.
I hit him in the leg, but he threw a rock at me.
This was in the playground on Thursday.
I didn't see him on Thursday.
And what did you do after you hit him?
Well, once he fell, and he didn't get up, so I just left.
He was telling police what they felt were details that only the killer could have known. And that sort of got everything into high gear because they realized that Boo was now the suspect.
Everybody knew what happened to him. They found the body. Then, like, that day, they were like, they found the weapon. There was all different stories what happened to him, I guess, you might as well say.
We're bringing your grandmom in. We'll just be another minute.
After 3 grueling hours, police believed they had an admission of guilt.
What we did is had your confession typed up. We need you to read it and sign it. Both you and your grandma.
A confession was drawn up based on the interrogation. Boo signed the document, even as he was insisting he had not murdered his friend.
Have you told us the truth now?
Yes, but I didn't do it.
Boo Mason was charged with murder and remanded to a juvenile detention center.
I was not with Gary Grant the day when he was missing, and I did not have anything to do with his murder. The one cop said, if you admit that you did it, we'll let you go home. So me at the age of 12, I was so tired, I said, if you say so, but I didn't. And then the next thing I knew, I wound up in a home.
Do you live in Atlantic City?
Yes.
On Sunday, January 15th, Boo was given a polygraph exam. The results were inconclusive. 3 days later, a second test was administered.
Did you hurt Gary Grant?
No.
In both the first and second lie detector tests, it was determined that Boo had answered truthfully when he said that he did not kill Gary Grant.
Did you see Gary Grant get killed?
No.
There was some doubt as to whether he had been at the scene, however.
You now told the entire truth about Gary Grant's murder.
Yes.
I feel that he very easily could have been intimidated by the person who did it or who was there when it was done, could have told him that, hey, if you say anything to anybody, you're next.
Now, I have completed 3.5 days of testimony.
A month after Boo Mason was arrested, a hearing was held to determine whether his confession was admissible in court.
And this court cannot find beyond a reasonable doubt that any of the statements made by the juvenile were voluntary statements.
The charges against Boo Mason were dropped, and police never came up with another viable suspect. But 2 years later, it became obvious that someone had not forgotten Gary Grant, Jr. At approximately 3 a.m. on January 4th, 1986, a vandal painted a chilling message on the side of an Atlantic City patrol car. Gary Grant's dead. I am living. Another will die on the 1/12/86 if all goes right. January 12th would have been the second anniversary of Gary Grant's murder.
I was called via police radio to come over there and take a look at the car. And I did, and from what I observed on the car, it appeared to me that it was written on there by an adult. However, as far as ever finding out who did that, no one ever, we've never found that out.
A few weeks later, a second cryptic message was scratched on a sidewalk. Gary Grant Jr. lives. I still killed him. Son of a pig officer. Payback is a MF. This second message led to speculation that Gary had been murdered as retribution, possibly for an arrest his father had made.
That thought has gone through my mind 1,000 million times, but there's not one thing that stands out that I could think of, because I've never had anybody look at me in the face and say to me, I'm going to get even with you for this.
9 years have passed since Gary Grant Jr. was murdered. His father is still looking for information, still passing out flyers, and still barred from officially working on the case.
Somebody knows something. There's no doubt in my mind. It's just not possible that something like that could happen without somebody seeing or hearing something, or even within the last 9 years, somebody saying something to somebody about it.
I would like to see the person or persons who are out there and they know who they are to come forward, so I could have a little peace too in my mind, in my heart.
Morro Bay, California is a kind of small town Alfred Hitchcock might have loved. On the surface, a picture postcard seaside fishing village. Peel back a layer, though, and a quirky cast of characters emerges. So does a murder mystery, or maybe two. Fishing is Morro Bay's main industry. In the 70s and 80s, work was irregular at best. That suited Hugh Harlan just fine.
210.
He had pared his life down to the basics. Hugh thought you should work for the sheer joy of working, if and when the spirit moved you.
That makes 16,000.
There were a number of times that he would stop by our business, and we'd be unloading fish, and we'd have been at it for quite a while, and he'd roll up his sleeves and pitch in. And 6 or 7 to 10 hours later, when we're finally done, you know, Hugh wouldn't take any money for his help. He wasn't just a weirdo. He might have been weird at times, but he wasn't a weirdo.
Hugh Harlan's high-minded notions about work and money were all well and good, but he hit a roadblock when it came to his wife, Diane. Diane Harlan was generous to a fault. She squandered what little money Hugh gave her on beggars, on her friends, and on her dogs.
Well, I'm going down to the docks.
Yeah, leave me some money, Hugh.
It led to more than one bitter argument.
Groceries, food.
What'd you do with the money I gave you yesterday?
I spent it, okay?
They weren't getting along very well, and Diane would do bizarre things, including opening a can of dog food and serving it to Hugh for dinner.
Lisa, Jimmy, the dogs. I can't support the entire county.
Hugh, you want dinner or not? It's as simple as that, okay?
Don't walk away.
Hey, don't you touch me.
Rumor had it that Diane not only served dog food in the can, but that once she even baked it into a casserole for her unsuspecting husband. It seemed Diane cared more for her dogs than she did for Hugh. In fact, around Morro Bay, Diane was known as the Dog Lady. October 13th, 1982. The badly decomposed body of a woman was found just off the beach at Morro Bay. A jade bracelet and a silver bracelet lay nearby. Police could not identify the woman, but they could identify the murder weapon. The victim had been strangled with a dog leash.
The investigators immediately put out a news media release with a description asking for the public's assistance in identifying this individual. Later in the evening, the department was contacted by Hugh Harlan.
Hugh, you recognize this?
Hugh Harlan was shown several pieces of jewelry, and he identified that jewelry as belonging to his wife, Diane.
Yeah, that silver one was hers. That was hers for sure, yeah.
When was the last time you saw Diane, Hugh?
Hugh Harlan told police that Diane had been away from home for 12 days. He said he wasn't worried until he heard about the body.
She was there. I came home about 7 o'clock. She wasn't home.
Why'd you wait almost 2 weeks to report her missing?
Didn't seem unusual to me for her not to come home. She's done it occasionally.
She's done this before?
Every now and then, yeah.
You remember what time the dogs came home that night?
Yeah, it was about 11:30.
Can you remember if they were wearing their leashes or not?
Yeah, they had their leashes on that night.
What's this, Hugh?
I don't know, what is it?
Found this tied around Diane's neck. Looks like a dog leash, doesn't it?
That's right. Dogs came home, they didn't have their leashes.
Well, which way is it, Hugh? Did they come home with their leashes or without their leashes?
When Hugh Harlan changed this story, the investigators began to look more closely at him as a possible suspect.
Can I go now?
I asked him, I said, Hugh, you know, a lot of people suspect you. Did you kill her? You know, I know she's bizarre, and I know she tried to push your buttons. Did you do it? And I knew when he answered that question, he was telling the truth, that he didn't do it. I mean, he said he didn't do it.
Diane Harlan was 43 years old when she was murdered. No charges against Hugh or anyone else were ever filed. To this day, the case remains unsolved. 4 years passed. Hugh Harlan's life went on much as it had before Diane's death, until November 1st, 1986. That day, Hugh went to a friend's house to borrow some tools for a 2-day construction job up the road in San Simeon.
You probably need these hand tools.
Yeah, throw them up in there.
Let me get the gate for you.
Yeah, thanks.
Hugh Harlan set off for San Simeon, 27 miles north of Morro Bay, before dark.
You're all set, Huey.
What it is, bro?
What in word. Have a good one.
But soon the mystery would take yet another twist, near the town of Cambria.
The next thing we knew, I'd gotten a call from a mutual friend in Cambria, wondering why Hugh's truck was setting off the side of the road and had been for a day or so.
Steve Matthew and a friend, Eddie Grimes, drove to Cambria to check out Hugh's abandoned truck.
What a wheelbarrow there. No keys in the truck.
I got curious as to what was going on. I took a look inside. I saw Hugh's glasses on the dash. I saw a couple of tins on the dash. One with tobacco and one with some ragweed pot that he smoked quite regularly. All of these things weren't really adding up to me since 3 days or so had transpired since the last time I'd seen him, and this is basically the way he had left.
The mystery did not end there. Before Steve and Eddie left to look for Hugh, Steve walked over to make a pit stop at the edge of the woods.
Hey, Eddie. Here's the keys.
What the hell are they doing there?
It was at that point that I decided that there were just too many elements involved here to be a straight-up situation.
I think we ought to call the cops. I think you're right. Let me lock it up.
What could have happened to Hugh Harlan? Did he meet with foul play, or did he simply decide to disappear?
There are several possibilities as to what could have happened to Mr. Harlan. Number one, he simply could have possibly staged his disappearance. He knows he had been at one time questioned regarding the homicide of his wife.
I totally believe that Hugh was smart enough and crafty enough to engineer his own disappearance, and just in exactly this manner, if he so wanted to. The thing that I've never been able to decide is if that's actually what he did or if there was some foul play here.
If he wanted to disappear, he was the kind of person that would have left his truck with somebody he wanted to have it. He wouldn't have left it by the side of the road like that.
Indeed, why would Hugh Harlan want to disappear? After 4 years, police no longer considered him a suspect in his wife's murder. Authorities now fear that Hugh might have had a deadly encounter with the same person or persons who killed Diane.
Hugh Harlan knew, I believe, and I think the investigators at the time believed, that knew more about the case than he was telling them. And my concern is possibly he was harmed by some individual who may very well have harmed Diane Harlan.
The case of Diane and Hugh Harlan is multi-layered. Mystery on top of mystery, disappearance on top of death. Years after the fact, people around Morro Bay still talk about Diane's murder and Hugh's disappearance as if they happened only yesterday. The key to the mystery lies in finding Hugh Harlan, if he is alive. At the time of his disappearance in 1986, Hugh was 51 years old and weighed between 130 and 150 pounds. He is 5 feet 6 inches tall and is missing the thumb and forefinger on his left hand. Next week on Unsolved Mysteries, the controversial story of 2 American servicemen whose untimely deaths are under investigation by Congress. Army Sergeants Billy Ray Hargrove and Mike Carmichael were the best of friends, and both wanted to spend the rest of their lives in the military. But in 1992, just 6 weeks apart, Hargrove and Carmichael were both found hung to death. The Army ruled that the 2 men had committed suicide, but their families are convinced they were murdered. Join me next time for this intriguing case and more on Unsolved Mysteries.